Welcome back, folks. I'm still a little bit busy, so I cannot make any new promises on new videos, but the change to the armor penetration on the public test server really caught my eyes. So this is basically the tier 10 medium tanks nerf that they promised like 3 months ago, but people were complaining that they nerfed the penetration without nerfing gold shells, so it got postponed until recently, which is yesterday. So if you look at the main website, they have the public test server up, but it's not for the 9.9 patch just yet. So it's for 9.x whatever. But if you read through this, they list all the changes to the penetration for mostly tier 10 medium tanks. Now, it's like the 9.8 personal missions on the test server patch notes. They just list a bunch of numbers, and you could read through it. You don't really understand it. So I took the liberty again to put everything into Excel, and everything is graphically analyzed and stuff. I'll just explain it. But yeah, it's a bunch of numbers and it's all letters and stuff. It's just blah. So you cannot get a good grasp on what's going on. But today I'll put everything into detail and explain everything. So here is Excel. Now, as with previous videos, Excel hates my recorder or the other way around, but it might get interference on the microphone, so bear with it, tolerate it. But today we'll talk about the 9.x changes to the armor penetration. So this penetration nerf was planned like 3 months ago or so, but they postponed it because people were complaining that they did not nerf the gold ammo or the premium ammunition. So yeah, Wargaming postponed it until recently, which is yesterday. Now this is not yet determined to be the 9.9 patch, so don't get into a hissy fit, alright? Don't go apeshit. It's not for the 9.9 patch. Be patient, don't worry yet. Like all public test server, it's not final, so everything could be changed in the immediate time, but intermediate time, whatever. Also, this is not a leak video because everyone could read the patch notes for themselves. This video will analyze how dramatic the change with the numbers and calculate what's likely going to happen in the future. So I'll make predictions and stuff. And I'll list the upcoming best tier 8, 9, and 10 vehicles that's better than the nerf ones based on this patch. So I'll give you guys a few tips on where to grind and which tanks should be more OP now based on the nerf. So basically, yeah, some tanks got passively buffed. Passively buffed means that other tanks in competition got nerfed, so they got passively buffed. So most tanks are tanks with armor, like the E100, or some tank destroyers with a lot of armor. So yeah, based on this nerf. So a lot of benefits in coordination with the nerf. Gold ammo will still be used, but more skills are required to use them. For example, you cannot just shoot a BL-10 APCR round into the upper glacis of a mouse and expect it to penetrate anymore. So yeah, you still have to use skill now. You can't just blindly shoot at a blank target. And my initial opinion about these nerfs is, why the hell did you nerf the ISU and the Jagdpanzer E100? I'll talk more about it, but rage! So here is the tier 10. So as you can see, I listed all the stuff with the old penetration and the new penetration and the various vehicles on the left. So I'll put this spreadsheet into the description of this video and you can download it for your future references, but here it is. So you can see that most heavy tanks got nothing changed, so unchanged are below here. So heavy tanks are mostly the same. Medium tanks were the one that got nerfed pretty hard, so you can see the changes, but they got a compensation by the dispersion buff, so they got compensated somewhat. So yeah, it's all the numbers, and this does not explain a lot, but if you look down here, I put the analysis of these changes. So basically, on average, the change to the heavy tank average penetration is only increased by 1-ish, so that's actually a little bit buff. Medium tanks got nerfed pretty hard from the average of 264 millimeters of penetration to the average of 242. That's more than 20 millimeters nerf on medium tanks. That's crazy hard for tier 10 mediums. Tank destroyers got nerfed by a bit, around 15 or so. So that still sucks, but 280 millimeter is very good against most armor other than the mouse or the E100. So yeah, it'll still be fine. And the premium gold shell also got nerfed, but not as much. So below here, I listed the percent change from previous penetration. So what this means is how much the change happened for these tanks. So as you can see, heavy tanks got changed only about 0.29% positive. So that's actually a buff. Medium tanks got changed by minus 8%. That's a lot. that's almost 10% in change. That's almost 25 millimeters in change. That's crazy hard. That's rough. Tank destroyers got about 5%, minus 5% change. So still a bit rough, but 15 millimeters less on average. So gold shell doesn't get changed that much. So heavy tanks only got minus 2%, medium tanks minus 3.3%, and tank destroyer got minus 7%. So only the gold shells for tank destroyers got nerfed, which is, they don't really need it. Yeah, so yeah, whatever. And based on the nerfs and the penetration for all the tanks, I suggest these tanks you should look into. So the E100 got buffed based on the penetration buff for the 150 millimeter. Yeah, by 8 millimeter increase for the derp gun. So yeah, the E100 becomes more popular now, I believe. Jeez. Yeah, it's more penetration, and its competition got nerfed in penetration, so it's more OP now. So pick the E100 as your new choice to grind towards. The IS-7 is still a good choice. The armor is the same, but passively buffed, remember, because everyone else got nerfed. So the IS-7 is a very good choice. The E50M, even though it got nerfed in the penetration, it got a lot of buff in compensation if you look at it. So the E50M right here got buffed by dispersion, as well as aim time, reload, and terrain resistance. So I think this might edge out the Object 140 and the T62A in competition, because if you look at the nerfs, the Object 140 as well as the T62A were the most popular tier 10 mediums, right? That's originally 264 millimeters of penetration. Now it has 232. That's 32 millimeters nerf on the guns. 232 millimeters pen on tier 10 mediums? This is god awful. But the E50M, at least it has the accuracy, alright? It has 0.28 dispersion, whereas the Object 140 and the T62A has about 0.33 or 0.32. So the E50M might edge out these two Russian medium tanks. So I might think I should grind towards the E50M now, but yeah, it might seems good. The Object 268 did not get a nerf, so this tank destroyer still has the 303 millimeters of derp cannon powerness, but somehow the Jagdpanzer E100 has a nerf for the 170 millimeter cannon. The Object 268 has 155. You're telling me a higher caliber gun has less penetration than a lower caliber gun? That does not make sense. So yeah, the Object 268 still has the crazy 303 millimeters of pen. Bummer. Ugh. The M60 patent, as well as the Object 907 and the Object 260, are the premium reward / Clan Wars reward tanks. So these did not get nerfed, and these still has the tier 10 medium tanks penetration from before. So the Object 907 and the M60 patent still has crazy penetration. So it pays off to get these. So it pays off to play Clan Wars, I guess. And the Object 260 still has the crazy penetration for a heavy tank and passively buffed because everything else got nerfed. So most tier 10 mediums got nerfed, the object 260 got buffed. Cannot penetrate the armor anymore. So yeah, these are my regular, or I think most OP tanks to play at tier 10 now, based on the nerf to the penetration. So here's the conclusion. So regarding to the standard ammunition, heavy tanks penetration remain mostly the same at around 250 millimeters. Medium tanks got nerfed about 10% from 260 millimeters to 240 millimeters. So heavy tanks still has more penetration than medium tanks. Tank destroyers penetration were nerfed around 5% to the average about 280-ish millimeters, which is still pretty decent against most vehicles, but it's not crazy good at 300 millimeters average. So regarding to the gold ammunition, so gold shells were nerfed for heavy tanks and medium tanks only a little bit by 2% to 3.5%. So not as crazy as nearly 10% for the standard ammunition on medium tanks at tier 10. Premium shells for tank destroyers were nerfed the hardest by 7%, but it's not like they're gonna need it when they have around 285 millimeters on average pen, so they don't really need it. But when they do, they're probably gonna pen anyways, so So in order to compensate the dramatic nerf to medium tanks, most of them were buffed by accuracy dispersion or some sort of aim time / reload buff. The actual accuracy of tier 10 mediums are not touched, so they still have their accuracy rating, but it's only the dispersion, so you get tighter spread on your aim circle when you're moving and shooting when you're traversing your turret or your hull. So it's not actually an accuracy buff, it's more like a dispersion buff with the aim circle spread. So understand that. The AMX-30B did not get a compensation. I don't know if it's recent, but yeah, based on from Tank Inspector, it has above average dispersion for turret traverse, but below average for moving and hull traverse, so that sucks. If you had the M60 patent and / or the Object 907, they still have the unnerfed penetration, so they're pretty much OP tier 10 mediums now. So astounding nerfs to the Object 140 and the T62A, the staples medium tanks for tier 10 clan wars or tournaments. So it has only 232 millimeters now. That's a 32 millimeters nerf. That's insane. And the Bat Chat has 241 millimeters, so that still sucks. But it has an autoloader, so If the Yak Panzer E100 has an AP nerf to 278 millimeters of penetration with a 170 millimeter gun, why doesn't the 170 millimeter howitzer that fires AP shell on the GW Tigers and the GW E100 gets nerfed? That's not fair. Nerf the artillery AP shells, man. If you're nerfing the tank destroyers with the same caliber of guns, nerf the artillery. So that sucks. The difference between 240 millimeters and 260 millimeters is very dramatic because you can penetrate an E75's turret front with 260 millimeters. It will bounce if you have 240. So it's a very big difference. And some tier 10 heavy tanks have armor that's on the borderline of 250 millimeters. For example, the E100's turret ring, the mouse's flatter turret cheeks, the upper glacis of the IS-4, and the lower glacis of the IS-7. So these all have about 240-ish to 250-ish millimeters of effective armor. And with current nerfs to the Object 140 and T62A, you're not going to penetrate. Whereas before, yeah, you have a chance to penetrate if you shoot at these weak spots. But now, nope. You kind of go through the front of most heavy tanks now, other than the E100's lower plate or something. So, yeah, yikes. It looks like the E50M might be the most popular tier 10 mediums now, based on the accuracy and the buff to the movement and dispersion. So, yeah, the E50 might be the best tier 10 now, other than the Object 907 and the patent. And basically, most heavy tanks are passively buffed by this because everybody else got nerfed. Mediums and tank destroyers got nerfed. Gold ammo wasn't changed that much, just enough so people don't complain about it based on the nerf. So yeah, play the E50M or the E100, IS7, very good choices. So that's tier 10 for you. Ugh. Here's tier 9. Tier 9 did not get dramatically changed as tier 10. So the yellow parts are the non-changed. The blue highlights are also the non-changed. So as you can see, most tanks were not changed as much. But if you look at the actual comparison, we can see that the delta percent change is that it's only 3% for the heavy tanks, 3% for the medium, and 2% for the tank destroyers. So not that much. The gold shells got changed dramatically for heavy tanks, so by 7%, but tier 9 heavy tanks don't really need gold shells that much. Gold shells for mediums and tank destroyers are about 3.5%, so not that much as well. And I recommend you play the M103 because it's still pretty decent. The E75 based on the armor buff passively. The VK4502B passively buffed. The E50 still very good. The T54 still good. Even though the gold ammo for the heat shell for the T54 got nerfed by 30 millimeters, but 300 millimeters is still pretty good. So yeah, play the T54. The Yak Tiger did not get nerfed, so based on the armor as well as the gun, play that. And the Waffenträger Panzer IV. Now, if you have gone the way of personal missions and got to the T55A, that tank used the same gun as the T54, and the gold shell did not nerf, so it still has the 330 millimeters of penetration. Ridiculous. So T55A is still a pretty good choice. So here's the conclusion. The standard ammo got reduced for heavy tanks by 10 millimeters or so to 245-ish millimeters on average. Medium tanks penetration were reduced by 10 millimeters as well to 225. Tank destroyers penetration only reduced by 2%, averaging only 5 millimeter less than before. So, not that much. Gold shells for heavy tanks were nerfed the most, about 7.5%. That's a lot, but they don't really need it. Gold shells for mediums and tank destroyers were changed about 3.5%. So, So the change to the penetration of tier 9 tanks were not as drastic as tier 10 mediums. Heavy and mediums lost only about 10 millimeters on average, and tank destroyers only lost 5 millimeters on average. So that's alright in my opinion. Gold shells for heavy tanks were nerfed the most, but I did not felt the need to use gold ammo most of the time when I'm playing my tier 9 heavies. So I have the E75, the M103, the IS-8, and the STI. So I don't feel I really need the gold shells when I'm driving those tanks. It's odd that the 122mm on the STI and the IS-8 was nerfed so much by almost 20 millimeters. So the upgraded 122 that's on the IS-8 as well as the STI got nerfed almost 20 millimeters. So that's crazy. But the SU-122 54 used the same gun as well as the IS-4. They did not get nerfed. So why is that? That's not fair. So the IS-4 used the same cannon, but it did not get nerfed. So they probably rename it to some other cannon just for the sake of balancing purposes. Russian bias. The WZ-111 Model 1-4 130mm gun is now inferior to the IS-7's 130mm, so that sucks. The Conqueror now edges out in gold ammo penetration than its doppelganger, the M103, so that's good. Most tank destroyers were not nerfed as hard as the British for some reason. It has 20 less millimeters of penetration for the 120mm on the Tortoise, as well as the FV4004 Conway. So maybe it's because of the DPM on these two British tank destroyers, But as you can see, here's the tortoise. It has 240 millimeters pen instead of 259. So that's 20 millimeters less penetration for the tortoise as well as the Conway. So maybe because of the DPM, it's pretty good. So these two British tank destroyers were nerfed pretty hard. That sucks. Ugh. Alright. The Yak Tiger 128mm L66 is mostly identical to the Waffenträger Panzer IV's 128mm L61, and they both use the same APCR ammo, the PZGR-43, and yet the Yak Tiger's gold ammo was not nerfed for some reason. So, okay. Not crazy high penetration of 330mm for the T-54's heat shell, but 300mm is still pretty good. So yeah, the T-54 is still a very solid tier 9 medium tank, and the T-55A did not get the nerf as well. So yeah, both are very good. Most mediums did not have the standard ammunition penetration nerf, other than those who have the L7 Royal Ordnance variants. So tanks like the Type 61, the Leopard prototype, the Centurions, they have the L7 variants, the Royal Ordnance gun nerfed. So that sucks. But most tanks other than that did not get anything. So no change to them. But that's kind of sucky because the L7 gun is pretty goddamn awesome. So damn it. And lastly, we have the tier 8 medium tanks or heavy tanks and everything. So here is the list. As you can see, not that much change because blue highlights and yellow and stuff. So nothing really changed. And below we have the results. So as you can see, the delta percent change is actually positive. So what that means is that these are actually buff to the penetration. So on average, the buff to tier 8 heavy tanks by 0.5%, the mediums got 0.8% buff, and the tank destroyers got 0.7% nerf. So not that much change, not that much. So tier 8s were mostly added for the fun factor, just so people don't complain, I guess. But yeah, gold shell were changed that much as well, only -2% for heavies, -1% for mediums, and 3.6% for the nerf on tank destroyers with the gold ammo. So I still recommend you play the T-32, the 110 or 110, the ISU-152, the Rheinmetall Borsig Waffenträger, the T-69, which got nerfed or got buffed, and the M26 Pershing, which got buffed. So as you can see, here is the, yeah, it got buffed. What am I talking about? So the gold ammo for the Pershing got nerfed, which was crazy at 268, but the normal penetration got buffed by 10 millimeters. So the T-69 and the M26 Pershing, these are very good choices for tier 8 medium tanks to grind up. So yeah, and the armor on the IS-6 is a little bit better because penetration nerf on the STI and the IS-8. So play the IS-6, the Super Pershing, yeah, the armor is still pretty goddamn awesome. And with penetration nerf across the board, yeah, play the Super Pershing. The Type 59 is also a good choice, and the T-54 prototype. So very good choices. So in conclusion, yeah, slight buff to heavy tanks for the T-32 and the VK-4502A. Medium tanks penetration were nerfed around 10 millimeters, buffed actually, I can't read, to the T-69, the Pershing, and the T-44. So that's good, but the gold ammo got nerfed a little bit. Tank destroyers penetration were mostly unchanged, other than the nerfs to the ISU-152, this type of 2, and the AMX AC-48, with a buff to the SU-101. So yeah, the change with the gold ammo is only about 10 millimeters, and for tank destroyers, only about 10 millimeters, and medium tanks and heavy tanks are only about 2.5 to 5 millimeters, so not that much change to tier 8s. So the change to the penetration of tier 8 tanks were slightly not that influential in comparison to tier 9 and 10s. So tier 8s were only like scraped with the penetration changes. There's a slight buff to only 3 tier 8 mediums, which is very good, but yeah, they still need a lot more penetration buff to the T34-2, to the Object 416. There's a lot of candidates to be buffed, but It's weird that the M6A2E1, the 105mm gun, did not get the same buff as the T32 or the T29. So that's weird. And the T32 and the VK4502A, as well as the T29, got buffed by 7 to 8 millimeters in penetration. So that's good. The AMX AC48 got nerfed a bit hard and lost 20 millimeters less penetration at 241. So yeah, it had 257 millimeters of penetration. Now it has 241. That's kind of rough. That's kind of rough for this TD. Ugh. It has less penetration than the T28s. Yeah, that sucks. Oh, 241 millimeters? That's way below average. Average is about 250-ish, but ISU 152 got nerfed for a bit, 10 millimeters less on the BL10. And it's weird that L7A1 on the Charioteer did not get nerfed, whereas the L7 variant on most medium tanks got nerfed. So is that for balancing purposes? But the Charioteer's L7A1 did not get nerfed. So that's good for that tank destroyer. And that's pretty much it. So as you can see, most of the changes were towards tier 10 mediums. What got hit the hardest is the Object 140 and the T62A, as well as the Batjet. So that's crazy, 232 millimeters. That's insane. That's terror bad. So yeah, play stuff like the E50M because the accuracy is pretty goddamn amazing, 0.28, with very good frontal upper plate and decent mobility considering the buff to the terrain resistance. It got buffed to the DPM, got buffed to the dispersion, so the E50M is likely the good choice. But yeah, this patch or this penetration nerf is mostly focused towards tier 10 mediums. Yeah, it's tier 10 mediums got nerfed super hard. Minus 8% change in averaging penetration. That's insane. So, alright, I guess I'll deal with it, but that's pretty much it. So thank you guys for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, thank you guys for watching. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.